Hello, people. I got my green screen going, as you can see. Got my new setup in my new studio, so that's cool. Should have my professional microphone arriving here pretty soon, at least I hope. Coming from Europe. We ended it yesterday with chapter 18, and we're going to continue today with chapter 19. Shout out to A&C Report for the background. As you can see, I couldn't. He had his logo on the bottom right, but I couldn't keep it in, so I'm not dead, as you can see. That guy's dead. Okay, so chapter 19. His attentiveness led into the warmer months that commenced the beginning of the long summer days that I looked forward to. Okay, I just have to say this. She spells "to" incorrectly almost every single time. She does the double O, "to," as in also, instead of the single O, which is the preposition. Anyways, it just annoys me. Okay. I couldn't help but enjoy his eagerness to see me more relaxed these days. He wasn't even bothering me to find alternate sources of girls for his twisted satisfaction anymore. And although I was still being used for his distorted sexual enjoyments, he further seduced me into believing I meant a lot more to him than I ever did. It all came to a sudden conclusion one Sunday afternoon in the Caribbean. Jeffrey pulled himself up to the ladder's first step and climbed up the next 4 steps to the top of the dock. His chest was heaving rapidly as he sat down, catching his breath. Glenn was the next one up, and then I followed lastly behind them. That's not very good narrative writing. How would she know he was heaving his breath if she was still in the water? Anyways. To me, it was an invigorating snorkel around the shallow reefs within the radius of the dock. But to Jeffrey, the half-an-hour swim in the ocean was enough to overexert his aging limbs. I took off my snorkel gear and placed it in the storage bench, grabbing us a few towels at the same time. Wrapping a towel around Jeffrey's backside and handing one to Ghislaine, I sat down next to them on the dock and we laughed how fatigued Jeffrey was, poking fun that he really is getting older. Very touchy subject for the vain at heart, but he didn't seem to mind it, probably knowing we'd never take the joke too far. We sat there in silence for a moment, an odd silence at that. Jeffrey looked at Glenn, and then Glenn looked at me, placing me once again in the spotlight. They both, scooted closer to where I was sitting, and I felt something stirring in the air. The biggest turning point events in all my time spent with them. Jeffrey sat next to me and put his hand on my back and looked at me with a certain kind of sincerity I had not seen in him before. I want to first of all tell you that over the last few years, you have shown me the kind of devotion and loyalty that I believe is rare to find among people these days. Qualities I hold that in high regard. Bewildered by the whole scenario, I just nodded every time he paused, trying to grasp what his intentions were getting at. He continued the praise for my nature, saying, I hope you know my appreciation for your embracing of my lifestyle. You have been achieving a name for yourself among the friends I have introduced you to. Everybody says basically the same thing about you. Same thing I believe. You're a delightfully funny girl who has developed into a mature, graceful young woman. And I can think of nobody else I'd rather have a child than with you. And just like that, he created a whole new dilemma for me to face. In utter shock from the completely unexpected proposition, before I could even think of anything to respond with, Glenn made the finishing touches with the business end of the deal, starting with the pros before the cons. You would have around-the-clock nannies to help you. Jeffrey would pay for a mansion of your choice in either Palm Beach or New York, and as if the drum rolls are beckoning. And you would have a hefty monthly allowance from Jeffrey's bank. Astonished at their first offers, I nearly took the bait. Then she continued to finish the terms of our pre-agreement with, but you would have to travel with the child where and when Jeffrey wanted you to be, and most importantly, you would have to sign a contract stating that Jeffrey and you are not monogamous, and that the child will belong in Jeffrey's custody in the event of a falling out between the two of you. She kind of threw that last one in there quickly, as if she could get away with me not hearing that I would basically have to relinquish the rights of my own flesh and blood and surrender them to a life of servitude and abuse with these people. My maternal alarm bells went off straight away, and I already knew my answer. No way I could do that to any poor baby. God only knew what these monsters had in store for me, let alone a baby. But it was an instant reaction that saved me. I don't know, guys. I mean, I'm really young and never really even thought about having kids yet. Wow, I just don't know. I slicked my hand through my hair nervously and took in a silent breath. I had to go beyond what I was truly feeling and give them the feeling that I'd never let them down. Putting an eager smile on my face and sucking up my gut's intuition, I told them, you know what, let me get my certificates and massage and have some time to prepare for this and get healthy. Then next year we'll all think about having a baby together. It was crazy to even hear me say that out loud, but from the expressions on their faces, I had fulfilled their wishes. Let's do this. Yeah. Oh, whoops. There we go. Cool. Oh, you can't see her face though. There we go. I'll just keep it like that. Much reason to celebrate that night. They were both in a cheery mood around the dinner table, except for me, who had taken double the dosage of Xanax to even cope with the high amounts of anxiety I had been suffering from since we got back from the dock. I wasn't sipping the champagne that night. I was gulping it. And when their moods turned from cheery to raunchy later that evening, it wasn't hard for me to comply. From the full effects of the state I was in, I would have agreed to just about anything. Allowing them to treat themselves to ravishing the tender parts of my body. For the next few weeks, everything went on as it normally would, and not another mention of their proposal. My birthday was only a week away, and I was turning 19 that year. All I wanted was to get my certificates before I got any older and get trapped into this life for good. When my big day rolled around, I was in New York with Jeffrey and Ghislaine. Sitting in my bed listening to MTV's channel blare in the background of my room, I was painting my toenails when I was suddenly buzzed on the intercom. It was Jeffrey calling himself to ask me to meet him in his office in 10 minutes. Perfect timing to let my nails dry, I thought to myself. Already contemplating his desire to come downstairs, I knew it was something to do with my birthday present. But I was more expecting the usual shopping money or piece of jewelry. Definitely not what I had in store for me. Definitely not what he had in store for me. I knocked on the slightly ajar door to Jeffrey's office and heard him backing me inside. Hello, what you up to? I asked in a cutesy tone of voice. Walking over to his desk, he looked up at me, taking his reading glasses off while granting me a big smile. Come over here and sit down with me, as he ushered me to come sit on his lap. Pulling me onto him, he had a funny look on his face, like he had something really big to tell me and was letting the anticipation build in the thickness of the silence. What? I laughed at the way he was looking at me now. First of all, happy birthday today. This was only the beginning of his announcement, and he proceeded to tell me, I know how much you have wanted this for so long, and you are more than deserving of it. You're going away to Thailand to learn authentic Thai massage. And within 8 weeks, you'll receive a certificate for being a qualified Thai massage therapist. Astonished at his attempts to see me get what I wanted, not exactly the type of massage I was interested in, but it was a start and a first certificate for me to acquire. My eyes lit up and I threw my arms around his neck. planting a big kiss on his lips, which I rarely ever did. Wow, I don't know what to say. This is beyond my wildest dreams. Thank you so much. I did well to let him know I appreciated his grandeur offer. He went on to give me the details of where I'd be staying, the school schedules, and how much he loved Thai massage. Apparently, it was the next big thing to hit the shores of America. I could use one of those right now. He had planned out an entire itinerary for me. I was to depart at the end of August, and he had already enrolled me in a class at ITM Massage School. I would only have a few days to settle in before I would be attending classes 5 days a week over 8 hours a day. He even had an assignment for me to do while I was over there. I was to meet up with a girl who was also being put up at the Princess Hotel, where I was staying. She had an Asian-sounding name, so I just assumed she was a local girl hoping for an opportunity of a lifetime, if she only knew what she would be getting herself into. If I decided that she met Jeffrey's particular quota of approval, then she would be sent over to the U.S. to meet with him or one of his esteemed colleagues. Besides the guilt of having to decide a stranger's uncertain fate, everything else sounded more than wonderful. 8 weeks gone from Jeffrey sounded like a lifetime away, and I couldn't be more excited at this chance. It was the opportunity of my lifetime, and I wasn't going to waste a second of it. Ghislaine came in a few minutes later, and the look on her face told me she already knew. I got up from Jeffrey's lap and gave her a big hug and told her, "This is so nice of you guys. Thank you so much." She didn't share my enthusiasm of excitement. In a dull tone, she responded, "I didn't have a thing to do with it. It was all Jeffrey's idea, but good luck anyways." She gave me her best impression of being human for a brief second and hugged me back. It was just her way, and I had to come to accept it. Depending on the level of slander her insult provoked was just her way of telling you she cares without really ever showing it. Probably doesn't make sense to most sane people, but after all the time spent with them, I had gotten to understand a few of their quirky ways. Even if I didn't agree with them, they knew I would for their sake of opinion. What did it matter anyways, I thought. I had been degraded in every other physical way. What's the difference when taking their mental abuse too? She spelled "two" correctly this time. Well, that's the only way she spelled it. Not the exact choice of employers I would have chosen over again if given the opportunity, but here I was and doing my very best to excel at their demands. I was sent home for a little over a week to pack for the long trip and make the rounds visiting my family before I left overseas on my first trip all by myself. It was great to see my family after such a long time away. My older brother and his wife even came down to visit for the well-wishing of my departure. Everyone in my family seemed stoked at the prospects of my long journey had led me down. Here I was jet-setting around the world in my teens and getting paid to study the course of my dreams at a cost that I only knew I would have to pay. It was a wonderful get-together with all of them around. A great way to remember them. If I'd only known it would be the last time I would see any of them, I would have emphasized to my brothers how much I really loved them both and how much I would miss them in the decade to come. But I just didn't know what my future held for me. I had nothing planned out. I was just hoping for the right opportunities. I also had a few good friends to catch up with before I went. Every night was another party, and by the end of the week, I was drunken enough to drown an Irishman on St. Paddy's Day. I was given the list of all of my friends' email addresses and told to keep in touch. Yeah, right, I thought. I was going to be too busy having too much fun to be thinking about sitting on a computer emailing people, but I told them I would anyways, as people do. Save myself the point of having to explain that in many different ways to a group of already tipsy, slurring teenagers. Out of everyone who was really happy for me, TJ wasn't. He hated the idea of me leaving him to have a non-stop party in Thailand without him. He was just starting to seem like he was coming good, and I didn't like having to leave him at such a vulnerable state. But in my young years, I had already realized I needed to do some things for myself, and this was one of them. There was still a huge amount of broken trust between us, trust that could probably never be rendered again. So I thought I was being decent enough letting him stay at my apartment while I was gone. But he was not to drive my truck at all. I paid too much money on insurance for that thing. And knowing his driving record, I didn't want to risk of something happening while I was gone for so long. He didn't agree with me at all, throwing a grown-up tantrum all over my apartment. This guy, man. Hitting the walls and doors, shouting the entire complex down. There was nothing I could do or say at this point in time. So I just put my dog on the lead and took for a walk to calm down the situation and give me some time to be alone. Mary Jane was the only one I hated leaving behind. When we got back from the long walk, she barricaded my suitcase while I was packing the horrendous amount of clothing that I always did. I was promising her I wouldn't be long and told her how much I loved her, giving her a big hug. I choked back on the tears that were swelling up in my eyes. It was like she already knew the night before I flew out to New York that this would be my final trip. There was a commercial flight booked for me in the morning, and I needed the rest that night to fully recover from my binge of celebration drinking. TJ crept into bed later that night and tried oh my gosh. Tried to redeem his behavior with sweet nothings and dry humping my backside. It did nothing for me sexually. I didn't feel like that for him any longer. And the sooner he realized that, the better he'd be off. I told him I wasn't up for it, and he picked up a pillow and slammed the door behind him. It didn't matter anymore, I told myself. The next day I was off and wouldn't have to deal with him or anyone. TJ caught a cab with me to MIA, the airport in Miami. He walked with me to the furthest point he was allowed to go by the security gates. And as we stood in the line together, it was almost heartbreaking seeing him cry. You can just throw it to me. Thanks, dude. What's up? All right. Oh, my bad. Here you go.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, have a good day.
You too. Have a good day.
He walked with me to the furthest point he was allowed to go to by the security gates, and as we stood in line together, it was almost heartbreaking seeing him cry. I told him I'd try to call him every day, attempting to give him optimistic ways to look at this time away from each other. In the end, he had me crying, and I had to give into my remaining feelings I had for him. One last kiss under the X-ray bridge, and he vanished out of my sight as I further down the terminal's long hall. Whoa, no way. New York just had a power outage. Is Ghislaine about to be axed? That is a great question. I did not know that you guys had a power outage. Did that just happen? So I'm gonna take a quick sip before this next chapter. Okay, chapter 20. It was only a short flight to New York, and I just couldn't wait until next week when I'd be jetting off to an exotic destination all by my lonesome self. It was all I could think about, talk about, and dream about. Finally, my break. Ghislaine did what she did best that week and prepped me for everything I could imagine under the sun. Do's and don'ts, emergency numbers, and Western Union locations were among the some things on the list she gave me. Like I said, she showed her caring side in other ways. There was also the name of the girl I was supposed to be meeting, the room she was in, and what dates she would be staying in. When I got out of Ghislaine's office, I was instructed to meet Jeffrey in his office. She had to stay back for some paperwork that she had to catch up on pronto. Making my way up the red and gold trimmed carpeted staircase, I prepared myself for some major sucking up before I left. He would be expecting it for his recent generosity, or so I thought. Opening those familiar heavy doors, the first thing I saw was an unfamiliar face standing over Jeffrey's shoulder. She was a tall girl with blonde hair twisted up in a professional-looking knot. Her big smile was flashing at him with hints of her cheekiness to come, and she was dressed to kill with a short, tight gray skirt and a matching suit jacket over her white button-down blouse, revealing her voluptuous, ample cleavage. She looked like the old college professor's wet dream. When she introduced herself to me, a thick Czech accent presented itself. Her name was Nadia Marcinkova, and Jeffrey looked just about as smitten as a victim of love struck arrow from no one but Cupid himself. Jeffrey further introduced her as his new assistant and masseuse while I would be away, barely taking his eyes off her for 1 second. It was a bit of a blow to take, being so easily replaced, but also a part of me already knew this was expected off of someone like him. Good for him, I thought to myself. Why should I have bitterness over someone I never had intimate feelings for, and knew had never really cared for me in the first place? Kissing her on the cheeks and telling her my name, I was doing my best to grin and bear it. She is jealous. Oh, man. We hugged for a brief show of uniformity, but it just was that, a show for Jeffrey to see. When he was away for the moment, or she wasn't busy hanging off his every word, the way we all started out, she would snub me off to only head off in another direction. A real bitch, if anyone was to ask me. But no one would anyways. It wasn't my job to like her. Over the next couple of days, it was my task to show her some of my techniques in massaging Jeffrey, and the erotic side of finishing it off. Nadia despised me even more when Jeffrey told her to follow my lead. Oh gosh. During the massage, as she tried to take over and do her own thing a few times. To me, it was quite funny, her competitive side. I had nothing more to prove, so watching her put on an act of seduction and scream out her every body function during a faked orgasm was nothing but entertaining in my eyes. After a few sessions together, it was my time to be off on another adventure far, far away from here, or from the chains that I wore for way too long. Jeffrey had someone else to fit the chains that kept me so close to him. Even though she wasn't the nicest of girls, I still couldn't help but feel sorry for her. No girl should belong to someone out of servitude. But unfortunately, it is the way our civilization has been for many centuries before us. And I don't see changing anytime soon, or as long as perverts like Jeffrey are allowed to walk around freely and procure our daughters off the street, all because he's got a lot of money to pay many, many, many people off. Throw out your confetti, because here I come, Chiang Mai. My celebration started the second I landed. It didn't take me long to make myself acquainted with a few fellow travelers and find the hotspots of the hustling city. It was like nowhere I had been before. The streets were lined with stalls offering an assortment of souvenirs, clothing, and knickknacks. Everyone lived so freely and was in such great spirits. The parties raged on until the wee hours of the morning, and people became best friends overnight. That's what I've heard Thailand is like. One of my best friends has been there. From the second I got there, I knew Thailand was going to be a lot of fun, and I was right. Popping bottles of champagne, dancing all night to the beat of every club's rhythms along my way, and carrying on like it was my birthday. Every night was a repetition I could definitely get used to. During the day, I was a real good girl. the teacher's pet even, showing the credibility of my experience in massage from over the last few years. And already ahead of the class, the teacher was using me to help instruct the others with demonstrations. Mostly in a class full of males, it wasn't a surprise that I made friends with quite a few of them. Some of them with ulterior motives, but for the most part, the sleazebags were none of my concern. I had already dealt with a lifetime of them to be able to spot one out and steer clear of his approaches. Out of the class, I made friends with only one girl from Wisconsin. She was a plain-looking girl with big brown puppy dog eyes and a long, drawn-out accent. Her first time leaving the States, or Wisconsin itself for that matter, so it was easy to acknowledge that she was a little taken aback by all of the bustling city life. So becoming her friend felt like I was doing a good deed, showing her around the hot spots of the Chiang Mai nightlife. Eventually, I even ended up inviting her to stay with me at my hotel. She was running out of money to party every night, then pay for school on top of her accommodation. So it was all becoming too much out of her small budget. So I thought about it and offered her a bed in my room. I had two of them anyways. Plus, she was a really nice girl, and if I could help make her first time out of the country an unforgettable experience, then I was also gaining something from it as well. The first month in quickly passed me by. Having such an incredible time on my own and putting my heart into learning Thai massage, it seemed to just fly past. Routinely, I had to call in and check in with Jeffrey and Ghislaine, letting them know my whereabouts and progression in class. Counting down the time until my course finished, Jeffrey was anticipating my departure back to New York. Can't wait to get my first Thai massage from you. I got you booked to come straight back to New York for my first one as soon as your course finishes next month. His eagerness put a twisted, familiar knot in my stomach, reminding me of the dream I have to awake from soon and the reality of the certain homecoming I would be arriving to. It's such a great course. Thank you so much for sending me here to learn this. You're going to love my new area of expertise. I am having such an amazing time over here. I had to let him know how much I appreciated what he had done for me, and he loved the head swell that it would make him feel as well. Hating the thought of going back to him, I wasn't going to let that put a damper on my spirits before I was still out there. It was my time to party harder than ever before. Every night was a new adventure for me. Chiang Mai was a maze of places to get lost in, and the vibrant city was my playground. The way I saw it, this was my last chance to get out and break free. Letting loose my inner girl, it felt so good to take the lead of my own life. End of chapter 20. So let's look at the comments. What's up, Quadrex? Thanks for checking in. Just putting up Kay's comments without affirming or denying what she is saying. Okay, I have yet to eat dinner or food yet today, so I'm going to go eat. And then when I return, we shall conclude the narrative prose written by Miss Giuffre. So if you guys want to check out my social links and subscribe, it's free to do so. Wait, this one, sorry. And I will check back in a few hours to finish up this narrative. Cheers, folks, and until next time.